Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, portfolio career specialist, accredited future of work coach, author and creator of Coach Right 90, the writing programme specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. It's time for the next chapter. Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. Helen here, recording on, lucky for some, Friday the 13th of February 2026, and this is episode 15 of the show. If you can hear the energy in my voice, it's because I've just come off the EMCC UK kickoff for our new aspiring writers group, and it was brilliant. I've been inundated with people getting in touch, saying how motivated they feel, how inspired they are. There were around 60 people joined us live, and with all sorts of different writing experiences. So we had poets, we had social media posters, we had fiction, we had non-fiction, we had researchers and article writers, and everybody came together for the purposes of shared learning. I am very conscious that I also talked about this podcast on that session. So if you found us today because of the EMCC UK Aspiring Writers and you are considering applying to be my co-lead for the initiative, please feel free to drop me a note and let me know. I'll leave my contact details in the show notes. The second incredibly exciting thing that's happened is this podcast has hit 500 downloads. Now, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever whether or not that is good or not, but Googling it, it says that it's good. And it feels like a milestone, and so I think it's worth celebrating. Thank you to everyone who supported this show so far. I know that this always gets crammed into the intros and outros, but if you do enjoy the show and you could take a moment just to hit the stars or the like or to leave a few words of review, it helps the algorithm gods get the show into the hands, or shall we say ears, of more listeners. I'm pleased to share that I've got guests lined up to share their paths to publication all the way through until the summer. So it's just as popular for coach authors to share their stories and their paths to publication as it is for those of us who want to see behind the scenes of other people's processes. So in today's show, I am interviewing the wonderful Ross Nicholls, and we talk all about his book, Poetry in Coaching. And at the time, it really made me reflect on how I could potentially bring more creativity into my coaching practice. I remember when I was doing my training, you are taught how to use certain models in a very restrictive and measured way, and it never really felt natural to me. I always valued the thinking and the structure that the models provided, but the flexibility wasn't necessarily there. And one of the things that I've been thinking about more and more is how I balance my creative and corporate sides, and more importantly, bring that creativity into the coaching practice. I find that when we start to think about how we can remove barriers to achieving goals or to coming up with solutions and ideas, those techniques are the ones that really help us find those all-important answers within. And I can't help but think about the parallels between models in coaching and frameworks with book structure. There are a number of defined ways that are the right way, in inverted commas, to write a book. Certain steps that your protagonist must work their way through, certain structures that are expected in the non-fiction space. And there's also the balance of reader expectations. So, for example, I read a book not so long ago, fiction title, which just stopped. It didn't conclude the character arc. It didn't answer any of the questions that it opened. And with non-fiction, there is a transformation that takes place for the reader. And so completing that arc is quite important. That said, how we do that can vary a lot. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been thinking about how I can use some of the structures and frameworks and models from the writing space in the coaching room, and creating some exercises that my clients have been telling me have really been quite useful. So I guess it goes to show that models and thinking exercises don't necessarily always have to come from primary research. Sometimes we can trust our intuition, our capability, and our creativity as practitioners. Business-wise, I have been having a bit of a rejig. So I've been a bit quiet on LinkedIn for a week or so while I do all of the behind-the-scenes work. I'm very mindful that CoachWrite came about because of a need. Coaches were asking me for more support in the writing and publishing spaces, and there seemed to be a bit of a gap. Now, you'll have heard me say before that I believe in meeting people where they are and giving them what they need. And so what I really wanted to do with CoachWrite was to create a suite of service offerings that would do just that. So I've expanded the service offerings that I can provide in order to support coaches at all stages of their career and writer journey get their words into the world. So whether that be super high touch and one-to-one and very detailed, including things like structural editing, I've now introduced offerings to support with that. And I've also broadened out the lower cost ways of joining the community and getting accountability. So wherever you are, CoachWrite hopefully will be able to come and meet you exactly there and to help you. Of course, when you're doing all that, it involves lots of things like updating websites, which is always very exciting. And yes, for those of you that asked me about my journey with using Claude Code, there has been some AI support in that process. But of course, the quickest way to find a typo is to press publish, and I'm sure the website is no different. So go have a look around, see what's there, see if there's anything that can help you. And if you do spot a typo, please just let me know. As far as writing is concerned, I am now about halfway through editing the Resilience book. It is getting there. I have added another 1,000 words this week, so we are tipping over the 60,000 word mark. I'm sure I'll chop some of those out later down the line. But what I've got to is the place that we call the deep pit of despair. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Seth Godin's idea of the dip, the writing process is exactly the same. And what normally happens is you start all full of energy and excitement for the new project, and you're learning loads of great stuff and you're getting words on the page. And at some stage, you realise that actually there's still quite a lot of work to do and it's all quite hard. Now, for me, that happens in the editing stage, and it's normally the structural editing stage. For some reason, I really rather enjoy line editing, but that's a topic for another day. Now, the dip, or as we say in the writers community, the deep pit of despair, does have another side. And what Seth Godin talks about is making sure that you push through to the other side, because that's where mastery sits, and that's where completion of the project sits, and that's where the sense of achievement sits. Of course, I have the luxury of having been here before, so know that I can push through. But if you're listening to this and you're working alone and you're feeling like you are in that pit of despair from a writing perspective, so if you're feeling that way too, know you can do it. Keep going. Trust me, it's worth it. Right, that is enough from me. It is time for the interview with Ross and the next chapter.
Welcome to the Coach Right podcast. My guest today is Ross Nicholls, a coach and mentor with 26 years experience of British Army service and deep expertise across business, leadership, career and wellness coaching. As an ICF approved coach educator, he co-created the competency framework for mentor coaching, and he is the author and editor of Poetry for Coaching, Transformation Through Verse. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Thank you very much, Helen. It's great to be here.
I am very excited. You are our first poet on the show. So you are very welcome. But can we start by telling listeners a bit more about you and your coaching practice?
Yeah, I fell into it by accident. I left the army back into 2008. And while I was kicking around trying to work out what to do with the rest of my life, somebody nudged me and said, you should try volunteering as a business mentor, which I did. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And I quickly got up to 9 different organisations and schemes that I was mentoring for. And the penny dropped. I thought, I should do this. So I started my company, Business Mentoring Services, back end of 2011. And shortly after, on the voluntary note, I got a client referred. And they said, well, this one's a bit different. It's something about his career rather than business. But you've been in the army, you know about these things, you know. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'm so used to that. So I just flew by the seat of my pants. And after the end of the second session, I just said to this guy who was so rigid and locked up, I just said, I don't know why, just spontaneously, see you at the next session. I'm looking forward to meeting the real you. And he gave me this really strange look. But at the next meeting, it was like a different bloke turned up, jacket off, tie off, hair all over the place, waving his arms, emoting. And I thought, wow, if that's what coaching can do, I want to be a coach. Yeah. So that was really the experience that got me into it. And then via digressions into NLP training and eventually finding a coaching diploma, I trained in 2014 and I've been doing more coaching ever since. But, mentor coaching is on the side, coach educating, and lots of side projects. Cancer coaching, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So, all sorts going on.
So very diverse. And how did the poetry book come about?
Again, this is what I love about the coaching journey is I don't know what's coming next, and I don't want to, and I love the surprise. But there's a story I've written in the book that underpins 2 of my poems. But in a nutshell, I went to my mother-in-law's funeral about 8 years ago, and unbeknownst to me, a message was going to be read up by my youngest son. All her other grandchildren were there except my youngest son. And I was fine. I was holding it together. I was fine. It wasn't my mother, nice lady, but not my mother. I was fine. And then this message was read out. Grandma, I will always love you and miss you always. And that's when I crumpled, because instantly I was transported back 20 years earlier to my own grandmother's funeral, which I didn't attend either, because I was in the armies in Germany, just come back from an op tour, exhausted. I thought, she's had a great life. She doesn't need me to be there. So it was 20 years of delayed grief hit me. So I decided to be with it for a few days. And I woke up after a couple of days of this, and these 2 poems were writing themselves in my head. I thought, there's something going on here. So I fetched pencil and paper, went back to bed, wrote them down. And I thought, these are pretty good. There's something going on. And I started noticing lots of other coaches in my network sharing great poems on social media. And there was always a story about the poem. Like, I was in the bath today, I'd just been for a run, and then I wrote this poem. There's a story. Or in my case, grandmother's funeral. There's a poem. And I thought, these are just too good to be allowed to disappear off into cyberspace. So wouldn't it be a great idea if we collected these together as a resource for the profession? And, with thinking out loud and various coaches saying, what's stopping you, and me realising nothing, here we are. We published last year, and the website's now up, and it's rolling.
That's brilliant. I love those sort of serendipitous moments where
that's a key word in this journey is serendipity.
Absolutely. So
we've just found the right people, and I put the word out on my network, and the right people came together to be my co-editors, and they had the right skills. So we were complementary, and we got the book over the line.
And that was going to exactly be my next question, because, of course, you have this idea, and it's a brilliant idea. Of course it is. Poetry is an incredibly cathartic thing to do at the best of times, and bringing that together is a process in its own right. So how did you gather that network together and then form that collective to bring a book together of poems that feel like a story as a whole as much as they are individual stories?
Oh, lovely question. Yeah, you've really got a rich question there. I have a project management background as well, being a military engineer, and project manager. And so I put together an outline project plan. I said, look, this is the concept, this is the vision, but we'll need some of this and some of that and some of this other stuff and people to do this, that, and the other. Technical solutions, somebody to edit it, somebody to publish, yada, yada. And the right people came together and, we eventually found the right publishing facilitator. Technically, we're self-published. It just so happened that one of our co-editors was brilliant at actually editing creative work. So she did the final edit of all of the poems and stories. And almost all the poets accepted that. And there are 41 contributing poets in the book, and there are 111 poems and 111 stories behind the poems. So there's a lot of creative work to be edited, which she did brilliantly. I mean, for example, when she edited mine, they're hugely improved. Quite simple, but very effective. So it took it from sort of a enthusiastic amateur to semi-pro, if you like. It made it professionally acceptable. And it just so happened that one of our other co-editors has a brother who's a professional writer and editor. So she talked to him about what we were doing, and I was getting all this great sideways input to say, okay, we need this. This is how you actually do it. This is how you actually package it up. And so what we ended up doing, rather than just listing all the poems alphabetically or by some sort of random process, we actually ended up identifying themes which became the 6 chapters. So we have connection, love, acceptance, forgiveness, resilience, and life. Those are the 6 chapters. And so the overall structure was curated like that. And within it, there were 6 other co-editors, me as the editor. So I gave them a chapter each and said, right, within that chapter, you know which your poems are. You've got 20, 30, 40 poems. You curate them so there is a flow within each chapter. So we end up with a book which really flows. The sequence of the chapters flows, and the sequence of poems within each chapter flows. So you have this, and we had to get the tone right. We had to get the layout right, the accessible fonts, even down to for neurodiverse people. Starting on the second page at the same level, all this sort of stuff, so that it was accessible for all readers. So it was a hell of a journey to go on. There was so much to learn and vast amounts of work, far more than I ever anticipated. But the end product, I am as proud of that as I am of my children.
And it's something absolutely to be proud of.
Oh gosh, it's I really want to go out in the world and have its own life, live its own life. It's that sort of parental pride I have in the book.
It's funny, isn't it? People do invest so much in their books that they do become almost part of their identity. Yeah. I think sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you hear people say my business is my baby. Well, in this case, my book is my baby. And the other co-editors are all women. A lot of them talk about birthing this book, co-parenting it. They have the similar parental feeling about we have collectively created this thing, brought it to life, brought it out into the world, and now we're nurturing it and we want it to go off and do its thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. And we obviously had a conversation before we're recording today, and we did an activity in that conversation which we agreed that we would do live on the show. So if you're up for it, I'd love to share this with listeners, because as you have said, there is a poem in the book for any situation, and that can shed light, can give hope, can give context. And so we thought we would do that. So I'm also a coach, obviously, and a lot of the clients that I work with come to me at a phase of overwhelm. And so if you are able to have a look in the collection for me and find a poem that's relevant to that to share with our listeners, that would be amazing.
I've actually got 2 here. You did tip me off a minute ago, so I had a poem in mind, but I'm just opening the book again, and I think this one is even more appropriate. It's quite a long one. There's about 12, 16 verses on it, but I think it does feel appropriate. It will go quite quickly. This is called Riding the Waves by Olivia de Silva. The day will surely come when disparate threads of your life finally merge into one. Your sacrifices make sense. Unfinished stories find their place. Storms of confusion gently calm. You put your feet up, turn your face to the sun. A soothing breeze of meaning flows through your troubled soul. And you pronounce this day perfect. Then, instead of enjoying it, this perfect day, you try to grasp it, hold it, and in that gut-wrenching moment, your perfect day goes. The day you worked so hard for, hoped for so long, swallowed up by the familiar, fearful unknown, your ever-open questions. Do I belong? What do people think of me? What will become of me? Will I ever be happy? Or am I destined to trudge through life begrudgingly? But of whom do you ask these questions? What kind of answers do you need? Because holding this moment is like bottling the sun, a glimmering illusion that can never prevent a torpid nightfall, gloomy doom, disillusioned despair, solitary confinement, or nobody cares. Deepest dark days, bad days, hold you down days. Days you thought you dealt with, left behind, follow you like quicksand, swallow you from nowhere. But rather than holding or discarding them, you learn to ride their waves. The freedom of the highs, the constraints of the lows, the exquisite mundane moments in between, all that weaves life's rich tapestry. Then you turn a new blank page. Continue this story in your own precious, unique way, where each day is perfect in its own right, and you rest in the light. Because you've known the hard-won treasures of the dark, you hold your head high now and march through every season on the momentum of this glorious unfolding life.
That's lovely. You can always tell when a poem is powerful because there's a pause.
And what's your response to the poem?
It's funny, I said hope, didn't I, beforehand, and it's the hope that it brings. I think people come to conversations oftentimes with a sense of overwhelm, with a hope that they will find clarity, with a need to find clarity. And the poem almost takes you on that journey.
If you're up for it, I'd like to share another one, which is shorter.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Also, this is the one I thought of first.
Okay.
And I think it's also relevant and appropriate for somebody in overwhelm. This is titled Catching the Sun by Aidan Lazzarotto. Our poets, they come from worldwide. Life is a funny thing, given and taken, so easily lost, buried within us, yet not far away. We seek it in spaces where we used to play, catacombs waiting, full of dust and decay within our minds. And yet, while we're seeking, we hear the chimes of knowledge and wisdom, and poetic rhymes calling our name. But over the mountains we were promised fame. We judge when we stumble and call ourselves names. We hide from our failures and highlight our shame. We give in to fear. Though when we settle, our minds become clear. We hasten our progress and let love draw near. We put down our struggles and choose to stand here, catching the sun. Oh, I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm always incredibly mindful of on a personal level is it's very easy to be busy a lot of the time. And sometimes if it's a sunny day and you have an opportunity to spend 15 minutes sitting in the sunshine with a book, I always say to myself, go and spend the time sitting in the sunshine reading the book. And that poem literally describes those moments, doesn't it? Where you go, you could squirrel away in front of the computer doing all the things that you think you should be doing, or you can enjoy the moment and just look and enjoy the warmth of the sun. Brilliant.
You've actually triggered a thought about another poem which is absolutely on that topic. Let me just find that for you. This is a shorter poem, and it's titled Just for 1 Minute by Tracy McEachran, who is one of our co-editors. Just for 1 minute I sat in the sun. Just for 1 minute bathed in light and warmth. Just for 1 minute I felt the presence of you, just as the sky turned grey to blue. Just for 1 minute I let myself rest, breathed deeply, filling my chest. Just for 1 minute I let my mind drift. Just for 1 minute allowed the stress to drain. Just for 1 minute in a whole day. Absolutely on that topic of taking a moment in the sun.
A moment in the sun.
Minute.
That's the takeaway for today, isn't it? And as we're recording this, it's November and it is unseasonably warm. And I did actually have a moment yesterday where I did sit in the garden for half an hour in the sun, which is ridiculous at this time of year, but very enjoyable.
Yeah, and we've got poems in here. People going for woodland walks, and moments in May, and autumn magic, and it's everything's here. Reflections on life,
Absolutely. And I'm fascinated, and I'm sure other people will be too, about poetry for coaching. So I'd love you to share a bit more insight into how people are using poetry in a coaching context.
Absolutely. There are all sorts of ways in which it works. The coaching process is defined by the International Coaching Federation as a thought-provoking and creative process, inspiring people to maximize personal and professional potential. And this creativity applies just as much to the coach as the client. Creativity in coaching, it's about thinking and feeling differently about things, considering things from different perspectives, which opens up a new domain of exploration and possibility. And this creativity, when we're using poetry, it can be art in motion as a conversation unfolds. Again, if we look at the, imagery, metaphor, symbolism in poetry, that's all part of the science of coaching. Well, guess what? Poetry's full of it. It's about imagining those parallel contexts of what is real now and what could be real, which enables transformation through verse. And it opens us up to new ways of conceptualizing about things, and it nurtures trust and safety between the coach and the client. Actually, how do you do it? It's about sharing the poem in the moment, just as we've done now. You say, well, what about overwhelm? What about sitting in the sun for a moment? Okay, here's the poem that speaks to that. And there is a specific link to the ICF coaching competence number 7 of evoking awareness here, which is defined as facilitates client insight and learning by using tools and techniques such as powerful questioning, silence, metaphor, or analogy. And as I mentioned, poetry is rich in metaphors and analogies. And the subcompetency 7.10 supports client in reframing perspectives, and 7.11 shares observations, knowledge, and feeling without attachment that have the potential to create new insight for their client here. So I'd like to give you an example, if I may, of a poem that is a particularly good example of one of the 9 uses that I identified. Let me just tell you what they are. So specific uses for poetry for coaching. Let me just grab them. Yeah, so this is what I noticed when I was actually putting the anthology together. What is it that people get from poetry within a coaching session? How do we actually use it? So I identified 9 ways that it can be used. So connecting to others' experience, gaining insight into your own experience, being present to your own emotions and going deeper into yourself, reframing your experience, gaining fresh perspectives, provoking new ways of thinking about yourself and your situation, evoking your uniqueness, equipping yourself emotionally and spiritually for the current stage of your life journey, and realizing you're not alone, that others have walked the same path. So those are the 9 uses, but there's a 10th use, which is for the coach. It can also be used for reflective practice. So I'd love to give you an example, which is a really simple one of the 4th use of poetry for coaching there, which is reframing experience. And I'm going to, if I may, I'll quote a very short untitled poem by Rumi, that well-known 13th century Persian poet that we love in the helping professions these days. And this one really speaks to one of those uses. So it's very simple. Here it is. Troubled by questions all my life, like a madman, I have been knocking at the door. It opened. I have been knocking from inside. Now that is a classic location reframe. That sense of knocking, trying to get in, actually when the door opens, blimey, I'm already inside.
Yeah.
Trying to get out. It changes the whole meaning of the poem. And sometimes that's one of my favourites to use, because it's very short. I've memorised it. And it can completely reframe a meaning for a client. That's just one example. Another example would be just throwing in a line. It doesn't have to be a whole poem. If a client's rushing around saying, I'm never having any time for myself, I'm always rushing around, my head's full of rubbish, I can't think straight. Rather than, as we're trained, we could reflect back saying, okay, I'm hearing that you're rushing around, you never have any time for yourself, you can't think straight. I could just throw in a line. What is this world if full of care we have no time to stand and stare?
That's an old favourite, isn't it?
Yeah, and go on, no time to stare at sheep and cows, read the whole poem. It's on. I've got a list of them all, I've kept them all, built up a big stockpile. It's this spontaneity, the intuitive use in the moment of something which feels appropriate to share, to deepen the experience, to reframe the experience, to allow the client to go deeper, to be creative, to evoke thoughts and awareness, and just stir things up. And I asked a few of my clients what their experience was of actually having poetry used in the coaching sessions with them. And they listed 8 things, actually. They're very similar, but a different perspective. May I share these with you?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, very quickly. So it allows people to see things at a deeper level. As the client says, it captures the essence of my feelings. It allows me to find new meaning in a situation. It gives me, or allows me to have a focus or an affirmation to refer back to. Sometimes it's the beauty of a poem which can touch a nerve or mark a moment. It can provide a reframe, a metaphor, or an affirmation. It can stir up feelings leading to clarity or more emotion. And it's meaningful when its application is appropriate in the moment. So that's the client perspective. And for myself as the coach, I use poetry to ground and center myself if I'm feeling a bit lost, flat, disconnected, to reconnect with my essence, my spirit. And as part of my journey of personal development, and as I'm coming to the end of my master coach training, that beingness is becoming increasingly important. You know, we as we go up the credential ranks, it's less about what we do in a coaching session; it's more about how we can be. So this personal development is really important in the long-term journey to mastery, or sorry, the journey of mastery in coaching. And so that's becoming increasingly important for me. And I had an amazing experience on this. I think it was the end of December last year. I was struggling a bit with the training, the master coach training. Something was bothering me, and I didn't really know what it was. And I concluded it was self-acceptance, a lack of self-acceptance, lack of self-love. So I sat. I got the acceptance chapter out, and I sat with it one afternoon, very quietly, cleared my head, and just sat there a couple of hours reading all the poems and all the stories, just absorbed it. And I did the same thing the next afternoon, just sat quietly and absorbed it, completely relaxed, unhurried. And when I woke up the next morning, as I was coming from sleep to consciousness through that sort of trance state where we're not quite asleep, not quite awake, I heard a female voice in my left ear say, "I love you." And no, it wasn't my wife. She was asleep next to me. And I didn't recognize the voice. And it's significant it was on the left side, because the left side is our female side. The right side is our male side. And I think, my immediate understanding of that was the feminine part of me saying, "I love you." And that's what I was seeking. I was seeking self-love. And I know that self-acceptance is one of the keys to self-love. And that was hugely significant for me. And that's an example of, personal development, but also professional development, as I aspire to be more of who I am, and a more masterful coach. So yeah, it's pretty deep, this stuff, when you get going.
It is, and it's a topic you're clearly very passionate
Oh
about.
yeah,
It's quite contagious, Ross, to be honest. It's like go and dig out the poetry books that are on the bookshelf downstairs. And you said earlier that there's a journey to putting a book together as well. So what did you learn through that process too?
One of the things I learned after is I'm never doing it again. I knew it'd be a lot of work, but it was about 5 times more work than I thought. It took over my whole year, 2024. I did very little else. I had to put my business on the back burner. I just coached and did this book, basically, with a bit of masterful coach training in the background. It's all consuming, especially when you consider it an anthology with loads of stakeholders, 41 poets to keep happy, and book designers and publishers, and yada yada yada. It just goes on and on and on. And there's so much to learn. There's a whole world of publishing and books. And every time I turned a corner, there would be something else to learn. So it was a really challenging learning, because there's so much you need to learn. So the first thing is, it is an enormous challenge, particularly for an anthology. The second thing is just how important it was to me. That's what kept me going. The vision of collecting poems and stories by other coaches, counselors, and therapists, and making it available as a resource for the profession, was something I was completely bought into. And I was going to do almost whatever it took to get it over the line. And it did take a lot out of me. So, if you really are passionate about something, you will get there. and I had to dig deep to get there. Also, I think the power of collaboration, just sharing something about leadership as well. If you can share an inspiring vision with people, you will get inspired followers who will stick with you. And my co-editors, they were amazing what they helped with. It would have been a far lesser product without them. It is a much more beautiful thing. It's whole and perfect because of their input, and it would have been a rather poor relation without their input. So all sorts of tough lessons there. And I think the biggest surprise when I came to looking to get positive reviews to put in the front of the book, you like to have the praise listed in the front of the book, which makes you think, oh yeah, this must be worth buying. I approached a lot of master coaches in my network, and I was really surprised that the number of them said, yeah, I use poetry in my coaching. Oh, I even use it in my business. It really surprised me how many other coaches use poetry. And when you do a workshop and you get other poets, other coaches turn up, you can bet that at least a few of them brought their own poems with them. And you can say, okay, anybody got a poem to share? And they are brilliant. They are so good. And as coaches, we've been through difficult experience. That's why we're coaches. We didn't leave education and think, teacher, doctor, engineer, poet or coach. That's something that came because we went through a challenge. We got some help. We thought, actually, I like this. I want to do more of this helping thing. So we've got a story to tell. We've got something to share, some insights and learning, some wisdom. And if we could do that in poetry form, that has a certain special value, I think. It's a great bit of wisdom and shared in a wonderful way. And I quote this in the book. Philip Pullman, the author of his Dark Materials, now a major movie, he said about poetry is not a fancy way of giving you information. It's an incantation. It is actually a magic spell. It changes things. It changes you. So, that, if you like, is the power of poetry. Coaching is all about change. Our clients come to us because they want change, and we are the spiritual cab drivers, the facilitators of change. And if poetry changes things, it changes you, well, why not use that as a tool?
Yeah. I love that, spiritual cab driver.
It's not original. I'm
borrow that.
I've read something else, but
But it's a really nice way of putting it, isn't it? We often talk about being the guide by someone's side, and I quite like that as an idea too. You're neither pulling or pushing someone; you're just next to them, by their side, as and when they need you, in the coach or mentor form that they need you at that particular moment in time. And yeah, that's just absolutely brilliant. And I'm in awe as somebody that writes alone and publishes with my publishing team that is very small. I've put together over a number of years. I'm in absolute awe of how you coordinated the activities. And as you said, you've got the work of the co-editors who are, have their own practices and their own lives and are, doing this. This is an off the side of the desk type project, isn't it, for people? And then you've got your contributors who, they're passionate and they've written these poems, but you need to tell them what's going on and keep them informed and all of that kind of thing. So how did you manage all of that over that year?
With great determination and focus and a lot of self-sacrifice. I really did sacrifice a lot. I sacrificed my business to some extent. I sacrificed my well-being. I was starting to go into burnout towards the end. And I sacrificed quite a lot of money to pay for it all, to get over the line. I'm the sole funder. But I made myself a commitment to myself that because this was such a complicated project and there were going to be lots of pauses, delays and setbacks along the way, the only way it was going to get done if I was absolutely on the front foot at all times. So that's what I committed to doing. Within that, I made a promise that nobody would ever be waiting for me before they could then do the next thing. So as soon as I got a question in, as soon as I got we need to do this, otherwise I can't do that, I would deal with it almost immediately. And so nobody would ever be the hold-up. I would never be the hold-up because there are more than enough hold-ups going on anyway with everybody else's lives and practices going on. This was not their priority one. It was my priority one. And that was the only way it was going to get done. The stakeholder management was the greatest challenge. Creative, sensitive poets and coaches editing their work. A dot here and a comma there, and that can be a deal breaker. So.
And that's a really good point, actually, Ross, because again, I often say to people when they've sent their first piece of work to a professional editor, is look at it and then put it aside and process it, because no matter how thick-skinned you are, you have put your heart and soul into what you've written, and somebody's marked your homework, literally marked your homework, and some of it you might disagree with quite vehemently. Of course, one of the brilliant advantages of being in the independent publishing space is you have the ultimate veto over whether or not you accept those recommendations or not. But there is an emotional journey that you go through when you get that feedback. And we all go through it. It doesn't matter how many times you do it. It still feels the same. You're like, oh, no, I agree with that. And you worked with a partnership publisher, didn't you, to get the book out into the world? What was that experience like?
Yeah, that was fabulous. By chance, she's just up the road from me in Amesbury. I'm in Salisbury, so it's only about 15 minutes, 20 minutes drive away. But that's by the by. We did meet in person eventually, but it was all done virtually. But that was a fantastically important relationship. It worked really well, very, very professional, extremely thorough, extremely knowledgeable, and there was so much that you need to know. And the great thing was, she always had an answer and she always had a resource. So we went from initially with the basic package, and eventually we ended up buying all the packages from her, including the PR, the promotional stuff. And she then helped me to find people who could train me to apply for awards, book awards, and all this sort of stuff. We haven't won any yet, but we have applied for some awards.
Keep going.
Yeah, so we'll keep going. So the fact that she was always there, she was always responsive. And even quite late in the day, we could do some major structural editing about the way, for example, the index was put together, the way the list of contributors was put together, how we were able to link everybody's entries so that we could see what pages their work was on and so on, what the title of their poems were. So we could not have done it without that level of professional support. It was worth every penny. And can I give a shout out to?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, we'll include details in the show notes.
Yeah, Samantha Pierce, Sam Pierce at Swap Books Limited. Highly recommended. She was brilliant. Thank you, Sam.
And that was actually going to be my next question, because obviously when you've got a book that is a book of the heart that can make such a big change for people, the really important thing is making sure that it doesn't just end up in the black hole that is Amazon, and that it actually gets into the hands of readers. And so how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a really challenging thing. We haven't done too badly. We're promoting it on our own networks and our own social media. What we've recently done is launched a website, poetryforcoaching.org. So we're selling the book directly through the website, and we are looking at launching that as a coach directory as well for creative and curious people, particularly coach poets. And once we've got enough coach poets on there, I'm going to invite coach education schools to see if they want to sponsor it. So there's also, doing podcasts like this, running workshops. I've applied to speak at the International Coaching Federation Summit in Paris next spring, to run a workshop on poetry for coaching. I've done half a dozen workshops with local coaching groups around the UK, and I've got more planned. So it's just on all channels. Keep on spreading the word, keep on making it available, keep on telling people about poetry for coaching. And what was really interesting is I had the good fortune to go to the International Coaching Federation Convoy Summit in California just the other week. It was only for 3 days, but it was really good. And I was roaming around with actually just a photocopy of the front and the back cover of the book in my bag. I didn't want to carry it all the way to American bag. And you'd be amazed at the number of people who stopped me and said, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. Tell me more about that." And as soon as they see the book cover, they have sort of two realizations. One is, I didn't realize that was a thing. And secondly, I immediately get how it could be useful.
Yeah.
They get it straight away, but they didn't know it was that possible. wow, everybody says, wow, what a great idea. I never heard of that before, but I want it. I want some of that now. How do we do it? And when you get somebody who gets it, they really get it.
It's like you've opened that metaphorical door that you were telling us about earlier and gone, hi, this thing.
That's right.
And you're like, oh yeah, come in. That's a sensible idea. Yes, that can be really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, and by good fortune, some of these are some of the bigger cheeses in the ICF. So, so maybe they'll put in a good word for me in my application to speak in Paris next year.
Absolutely. We will watch this space.
Yeah.
Now, as somebody that has shared with me this afternoon a number of amazing poems, a number of amazing quotes, I am sure that you have some book recommendations that you would be able to share with us too. So if you had a book recommendation, what would you share?
On what sort of topic or theme?
On, well, maybe on the same theme. So transformation or coaching, a book that one of our listeners might find useful. Or another poetry.
Yeah, nothing's coming to mind at the moment. I'm drawing a blank on that because I'm so focused on various book projects. I was also part of the team writing the coach body of competence and knowledge, which was launched at the ICF summit the other week. So
very different writing experience.
Yeah, much more technical stuff, So I'm afraid I haven't got other books in my head at the moment. I'm so focused on this project stuff.
Absolutely fine. Hopefully there will be some space for you to do some reading now that you've done your publishing.
Indeed.
And what advice would you leave coaches who are aspiring to write a book of any kind with?
It's quite funny when you asked that. It was about 5 or 6 years ago when I've been coaching for a few years then, and I was having a sort of networking chat with somebody, and they just said to me, "And when are you publishing your book?" And at that stage, I had no intention of ever doing a book. No, it wasn't even on my radar screen. But the more I thought about it, I thought, after a few years, a lot of coaches do actually publish a book. And, it's just one of those things. We go on that journey, we learn, and we have something we feel is valuable to share. So I would say, just say, follow your heart, follow your passion. And if it really calls you, you have to really want to do it. But if you do really want to do it, then there are lots of people around who can help you with that process. And I would say, reach out for support, because you will need guidance, you will need support. But if it's something you really want to do, it's a very worthwhile activity. I am hugely fulfilled by being able to get this book published. It means a huge amount. It's my legacy. When I'm gone, I leave behind my children and this book. It's that important to me. And if it's of that sort of order of importance to you, then do it. But do get some help, because it's a tough gig.
Worthy advice. Ross, that has been brilliant. I knew that I would have to keep an eye on the time talking to you, because I could literally get you to read me that whole book and then talk about every poem individually. So let's finish by, would you mind sharing where listeners can find you, your services, and most importantly, your wonderful book online?
Best place to start is poetryforcoaching.org, our website. Lots of other good stuff on there, but you can buy the book direct through the website. Failing that, in all the other usual places online and what have you. You can follow us on Facebook, Poetry for Coaching Community, on Instagram, Poetry for Coaching, or you can get in touch with me directly through LinkedIn if you wish.
All of those details in the show notes. Ross, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Helen. Thank you very much indeed. It's been brilliant.
Hope you enjoyed the interview with Ross. I have to confess, after we spoke, I went down to my bookshelf and dug out an old poetry collection that I used to read when I was a child. It was lovely reconnecting with some of the words in that anthology, and has definitely made me think more about how I can bring poetry into my practice. Next time, I'll be joined by Catherine Sir John Brooks, and we'll be talking all about her book, Internal Coaching, The Inside Story, that she's just completed a second edition. I'll see you for the next chapter.
Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen, that's O'Neill, O'Neill, or on Instagram at Helen O'Neill Coaching. I'll see you for the next chapter of Coach Right.